Hello there, and welcome to the English Language Club. We're live. It's the 1st of December already, 2020. My name is Colin Monroe, if you don't already know, and this is Tony Cooper. Hello, Tony. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Good to be here. How are you?
Yeah, very good. We've got quite a few regulars joining us. We've got Lolly, we've got Gaspar, we've got AJ, and a few. We've got Ricardo, who's new. So yeah, you're very welcome. And we've also already got a question from Ricardo, which is great. So anyone else who's got a question, don't wait. Just type it in now, and so that we'll get onto it when we can.
Yes.
So yeah, in these sessions, it's very laid back, very relaxed. We just we don't have anything planned. We're just here to help you with any problems with learning English that you have, any questions that you have. That's what these sessions that we've been doing are all about. So I guess we'll jump straight into Ricardo's question. He says, I'll bring it up on the screen. Just 1 second. Yeah. How important is the study of grammar in the in learning English? Thanks in advance. Well, do you want to start, Tony, on that?
Yeah, so this is something that we actually talk about quite a bit, Ricardo. So I'm glad you went ahead and answered or asked your question.
Yeah.
Grammar, one of the things that you have to understand about grammar is that, we think of grammar as a list of rules that you have to memorize. And that's kind of true, that grammar is a list of rules. But the reality is that there's way more rules than anyone memorizes, and that native speakers don't only know how to speak correctly because they've memorized all the rules. It's because they have, we say, internalized the rules. They just kind of get it because they've heard it enough times. So when you're talking about learning rules, because we don't usually talk about that internalizing process as learning rules. Like if you have a conversation with someone enough times, eventually you'll figure out how to start the conversation. But it's not because you sat down and learned a list of rules. So the rules, one thing that we talk about this a lot is the rules are like a scaffolding that you build around the outside of a building that's under construction, so that you can get up to the higher parts.
I prefer to say a tree, because a tree is constantly, the language is constantly growing. It's more like an organic thing than a building.
It's like a scaffold around a tree. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And a building was designed, a building has plans, and somebody planned it, whereas that's not really true with English.
Exactly.
Or most languages, really.
So, I mean, I guess you could think of it as like a scaffolding that you put so you can pick the fruit high up on the tree. The idea behind a scaffold is it's a tool to help you get higher, right? Once you get to the point where you are learning, you're internalizing the rules, you're learning just by picking it up as you hear and as you talk and as you read, you don't need to focus so much on memorizing rules. So grammar is extremely important. Understanding the grammar of a language is what allows you to speak in that language. But that's not the same as learning the rules of grammar, like as in memorizing them, right? So you want to learn rules up until the point where continuing to memorize long lists of exceptions isn't going to be as useful as actually getting out there and practicing. So here at English Language Club, we focus on understanding the kind of the core rules, that the why of things, like understanding why things work and the way that they work together, because that enables you to understand the whole without having to memorize every little piece, every little small rule. Does that make sense, Ricardo?
Yeah, let us know in the comments. Now, but then there's two kind of ideas of grammar, really. There's kind of like the terminology side of it, the academic side of it, the term, so the terminology we use. Knowing grammar is knowing what what a past participle is, knowing what a relative clause is, and all that. And then there's actually knowing how to speak and how to use English, how to communicate effectively and understand effectively.
Right.
So is that what you mean by the rules of grammar versus grammar, or would you say that that's not really grammar at all?
So the concept of a past participle is part of language. It's not something that was invented by linguists or grammar teachers. It's a concept. No, so participles would be an example of like grammar being, what's behind the language and how to use the language. Whereas knowing, hey, that's called a participle, would be an example of learning the rules, like memorizing the rules. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So to summarize, I would say because different people learn in different ways. A lot of people I've met, they when I was living in South America, people would come and they would just pick up Spanish really, really easily just by hanging out with other, Spanish speakers. I was never like that. I kind of need to study the grammar and things like that. And it needs to make sense to me. I can't just absorb it. So it depends on who you are. So so the question, how important is the study of grammar? Well, it really depends on you and how you learn, how your brain works. I think that's the answer.
Absolutely.
But remember that it is a tool.
It is a tool.
If you find that you're just saying things correctly without thinking about it, then you've jumped. You don't need that tool. You're the kind of person who can just absorb and learn the language naturally. In which case, well, lucky you. Okay, lots of people saying hi.
Yes, a lot of old friends and some.
Just quick shout out to a Bajwa in Pakistan. He says, "Can you guys talk to me, please? Hello, we're talking to you. You're very welcome here. Let us know if you have a question about learning English or pronunciation or anything like that." So one here from Steve Mike. He says, did you send that symbol is called the thorn sound? I thought he was saying, asking how to pronounce that. Now, this is a sound that it is a phonetic symbol in the IPA, but it's not one that is used in English. So it's not one that's very familiar to me. All I know is that it is very similar, or the most similar thing that we have is the th, which is normally the sort of O with a dot in it on IPA. So I believe this is a similar sound to that, but it is slightly different, but different enough that it's actually not used in English. Is that? Do you know? Do you have anything to add to that, Tony? Or is that?
Yeah, again, like it's similar to the ash symbol. It's used in a lot of different alphabets.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, I think we're losing you a little bit, Tony. Your connection's a little bit weak. I'll carry on until hopefully we'll get you back. Hang on.
I'm not super familiar with how it's being used in the.
Sorry. Yeah, Tony, we lost you a bit there. Yeah, just about. Anyway, okay. Yes. So I hope that's. Sorry, that's not a very great answer for you, Steve. But if you look up the phonetic charts that we use in the English Language Club, that is a sort of the sounds that are used in English. And unfortunately, my knowledge doesn't really extend very far beyond that in phonetics. Okay, so another question here. How can I talk the language very good? Well, that's a very broad question. And, practice, really. There is no easy answer. A lot of the time you'll see people saying they've got some sort of quick method. But it really does take work, and it's not easy. But if you just keep practicing over, a little bit every day, or when you can, over the long term, you will see improvements. Are you there, Tony? I can't. You seem to have frozen. Okay, I'll go. I'll go full screen until we see what's going on with Tony. Hopefully we get him back soon. I don't think I can do this without him. Let's see. Okay. Just looking through these questions. So Alejandra says, some people say that we don't have to translate to be able to speak fluently. Do you understand how we do that? I mean, what would be translating when speaking? Can you give an example? Well, I think what people mean when they say that is, constantly referring to your first language, and always trying to sort of think first what you want to say in your language and then trying to translate, rather than being able to just go straight to speaking English. And I think, I'm not sure whether that we've talked about this before, but I'm not really sure if there's a quick method to think in English. Again, it sort of takes practice and it takes time. But just the more you use English and the more you talk to people, then you'll start to get that level of fluency. So so again, there's no easy answer. There's no easy way to do that. It just takes practice. But that's what people mean when talking about translating. It's thinking in your first language and then trying to figure out how to say that in English, whereas as opposed to just saying it, being able to say things in English. Okay, here's another question from Shayu. He says, I think we've got Tony back now. Hello, Tony, are you back?
Hello, I think so. I'm sorry about that. Don't
That's okay. No, you look great now. That's great. So I've just opened up a question here from Shayu. He says, how to learn the British accent? Well, I guess how would you learn any specific accents that you wanted to learn? Well, if you got an
I want to make a little bit of a comment here, because partially this goes back to that same thing about learning, practicing an internal thing. What to do to start with, look up what are the differences and practice those. So for instance, one of the big differences between American and British English is the way that you pronounce an R at the end of a syllable or at the end of a word, right? And so, that you'd look that up, like, okay, I know that that's different, and then practice that. That would be a really good first step, right? Because if you can just get that, that's going to be a large difference in how you speak, right? Whereas if you just try to look up all the rules that are different, you're going to get overwhelmed. But if you pick a few that are really big ones, that'd be a good place to start. But obviously you are although you've never had to learn to speak with a British accent, have you, Colin?
Who, me?
Yes.
No. But although my accent has changed.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
My accent definitely changed. I do think when I started teaching English, I started to speak more clearly and my pronunciation improved. Because I grew up in London, and the way I used to speak was a much more of a sort of London accent. Never used to. I didn't really think about it too much. It was only when I started teaching English that I really started to realize, as soon as I'd say things, I'd realize that's not the correct way to say that. Although it's still, the way lots of people do, especially from my part of the country. But it's not 100% correct. So it's really funny how there's this gray area between sort of what is, actually correct, if such a thing exists, and the way people actually speak.
Yes.
So there's a big gray area there. How to learn the British accent. And I would ask, why do you want to learn the British accent? Because this is something we've talked about before, but there's nothing wrong with sort of foreign accents.
Absolutely.
There's nothing wrong with speaking English with a Spanish accent or an Indian accent or a Japanese accent, as long as you're understood. So this is the difference between pronunciation and accent.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, now if it's maybe that in your work you speak to you speak a lot of English predominantly with British people, then okay, then fair enough. Yeah, I know what you mean. But again, you still don't need to speak English with a British accent to be understood. You just need to have good pronunciation.
Exactly.
So, and yeah, so what we always say about pronunciation is that pronunciation is physical.
Is physical.
Exactly. So, yeah, make sure that, you know, think about what you're doing physically with your mouth and your tongue and your lips. How is the sound actually being made? Think about those things when trying to improve pronunciation, whether that's to get a British accent or an American accent. Yeah, that's always the best piece of advice. Okay, so here we are. Let's see.
We've got a bunch of questions now, don't we?
Yeah. So a Bajwa again. I hope I'm saying your name right. I doubt I am, but so sorry, sorry in advance. Well, not in advance; it's afterwards. But anyway, how can I talk to natives to increase my English speaking without paying charges? As I'm a student from MS English Linguistics, belong to a normal family. So yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
So,
well, one thing that I always recommend is there are, not right now as much, but there are American, British, Australian, South African, Canadian tourists and expats all over the world. I have never been to a city that did have a substantial English-speaking community in it. So it's a matter of finding those people. If it's tourists, that's easy. Not right now so much, but you can go to a place in your city that there are a lot of tourists, a market or a landmark or anything like that, and try to talk to them. Or if you're looking in your city for the expat community, the community of people who are not from that country but that live there, you can almost always find on the internet some site or group that helps people that speak English meet together. They might have a Facebook group, they might have a website, because people who speak English and live in foreign countries want to get together and speak English to each other. And so it's usually pretty easy to find groups like that. And you have to be careful not to push into a new community too quickly and expect people to teach you. But most of the time, English speakers are going to be more than happy to talk to you in English. And if you tell them, correct me when I make a mistake, as opposed to asking them for lessons, I think that they will usually be pretty receptive to that.
And in that context, those people probably also want to improve. They want to learn your language, so you've got something to offer them as well. So it can go both ways.
I used to sit when I was on the bus. I would frequently have someone come up to me and say, "Do you speak English? I want to practice my English." And I'd be like, "Great, I want to practice my Spanish," or whatever. Usually, sometimes they would want to set up something that was more long term, and I wouldn't always be able to do that. But at the very least, I could spend that time on the bus talking to them, and we could help each other practice, right?
Yeah. But also, it doesn't. In your question, you mentioned native speakers, but it doesn't need to be native speakers. You can still learn from other people that want to practice English in your country.
Yes.
And again, there may be groups on Facebook, or there's a website called Meetup where they arrange, groups to meet up. That may not be active in every country, but check that out because it may well be. Or you could even, start something on Facebook, so there's lots to do, but it's not easy. It's not easy. That it is. I guess it is. Yeah, it is a challenge. Yes. Yeah.
So Bajwa actually pointed out in a comment just now that they live in a rural area. So how do you do this? In which case the answer becomes get online. there are so many. English is one of the top languages spoken on the internet. And so you can always find English speaking communities to be involved in English on the internet. I mean, if you like playing video games, find an English speaking server to play on. If you like discussing movies, find an English speaking forum to do that on. There are a lot of online communities that speak English, especially now, more than any other time in history, just because so many people are looking for good opportunities to do things together, to play games, to play board games, to play role-playing games, to play video games, to discuss movies, to watch movies, to watch plays, to talk about the weather, to talk about astronomy, everything. There are so many online communities. It's just a matter of finding one that meets your interests. Finding one that and also speaking is a little bit harder, but there still are a lot of those as well.
Yeah, and you say you're looking for something without paying fees. So, and as we've said, there are lots of options. But now, if you wanted to have one-on-one class with someone, that could be expensive. That could be like £25 an hour, which is a lot. Which is very expensive for a lot of people. But something like the membership of the channel of English Language Club, although we haven't done very much so far, from January we are planning to do regular Zoom calls. So as well as on we'll continue doing these on YouTube for everyone, but just for members, we're going to do Zoom calls. So we'll actually get to speak to you. You'll get to speak to us. In a group of however many people there are, and at least for January, we're going to make that available to all levels of the membership. So, and the cheapest membership is only £1.99 a month, £1.99 a month. So that's like $2.50 or something. So yes, it's not free, but it's very, very cheap. So yeah, look out, and we're not the only people doing that kind of thing. So look out for that kind of thing as well, if because it doesn't have to be that one-on-one,
right?
One-on-one cost. It could be hundreds of dollars for a serious amount of time,
right? So but again, if you're looking for English learning platforms, those are not necessarily going to be free. They might be very inexpensive, $1, like $1.99 a month or something like that. But what I'm saying is that there are lots of places, free forums, free board game websites, where English speakers are on there every day talking to each other, and they're free. Like most forums and things like this are free, right? So you can get in a forum or a chat room that's not people trying to practice their English. It's just English speakers talking to each other, and you can get involved in that. And obviously it doesn't cost anything, but it does take time. You can't, like a one-on-one lesson, you might be able to learn a lot in an hour a week. Whereas if you're out there talking to people, it takes time it takes time to learn a language. You've got to be out there talking to people and practicing. It just takes time.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Lolly has a question which says, some people say that you can learn English in your sleep. Please, what's your opinion about that? Well, you just said it takes a lot of work. So presumably, I mean, I don't think you can learn much in your sleep.
So,
I mean,
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, there are these ideas that you can sort of listen to things while you're sleeping, and then it sort of sinks in subconsciously. Maybe that can help.
Well,
I don't really know, but go on.
I will say this: you cannot learn English in your sleep. That is not possible, because if you don't know English, your brain will interpret that as meaningless noise. However, once you have learned English, you probably can improve your English in your sleep, but it's not just like an easy key to learning English with no work. It may or may not help, depending on who you are, but you cannot learn a language that way. You have to learn actively.
Yeah, I've definitely sort of fallen asleep while listening to a podcast, and then kind of dreamt what was being said in the podcast. So that the podcast has definitely affected my dream. So I am, obviously, my brain is listening to it, Whether or not how much is actually sinking in, I don't think it's very much. I think it's a very small percentage. So you're better off trying to learn when you're awake, I think.
It definitely, yeah. I mean, I used to, when I was in university, I used to solve homework problems in my dreams, and then I'd wake up and write them down. It does. You can learn and you can do things in your dream, but it is not a good way to. It's not something to rely on. And also the science of whether you can like improve your vocabulary. A lot of people will sell tapes that you can listen to. I can't call them tapes anymore, but where that just have vocabulary words on them. And nobody really knows whether they work or not. They seem to work for some people, but maybe those people are just faster at picking up vocabulary anyway. But it definitely, in order to learn a language, in order to learn new skills in a language, you have to do that actively.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got a question about grammar here. Number 1 says, what are the narrative tenses and how to use them? Okay, so what are the narrative tenses, Tony?
What are they? Which tenses are the narrative tenses? The past tenses. Yeah, I'm not sure which one.
I think 5 of them. Yeah, I think 5 of the tenses are narrative tenses. Hang on. But basically, the ones that you would use to tell a story, because narrative means like a story. So the story tenses that are generally used to tell stories get called the narrative tenses.
Yeah. So I mean, the thing about it is like there's this idea of these are the narrative tenses, but the reality is we just it depends on what story you're telling. We mostly use past tense to tell a story, and there's a reason for that. Because stories happened in the past, right? But that's not always true. Some stories are told in present tense. The reason we talk about narrative tenses as a group is not so much because they have is because they're used to tell stories, whereas the way we use grammar has certain rules when you're telling a story that are different from when you're talking normally. One example of that is you have to be consistent about your tenses in a story. If you use past tense, you have to use past tenses exclusively. Whereas when you're talking in a conversation, we mix past tenses, future tenses, present tenses. And this is something that's really difficult for a lot of people when they're not skilled writers or speakers, is they will blend present tenses into a story. And you can do that normally in conversation. You can use present tenses and past tenses, but you cannot when telling a story. In normal conversation you can, but not when it's a narrative. So that's an example of why we talk about narrative tenses, because they have separate rules when you are telling a story. But they're the past tenses, I think. It's just, the past, present, past perfect, past continuous, past perfect continuous. Simple. I may have said past. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, basically it's those. But the thing is so you'll use them together. So sometimes you might use the past continuous to sort of set the scene or give context to an event that happened. So you might say it was raining on the night when the man arrived at the house.
Exactly.
So in that sentence, I started by setting the scene with a continuous by saying it was raining, past continuous, and then past simple when the man arrived. So they sort of kind of work together in a way that to tell stories. Okay, great. Let's see.
So we've got some Santa questions from.
Oh yes, we always have a few great vocabulary or good phrases from Susanta. So, what does hedging their bets mean?
So actually, Colin, this would be you should give the answer to this question.
Yeah, well, so hedging your bets in kind of finance and investing, you might invest in one thing or bet on one thing, but then you don't want to be completely you don't want to have or you risk everything on that one thing. So you might then make another investment that kind of balances it out. So that's what hedging your bets is. It's kind of diversifying your investment.
Yes.
However, this phrase is used a lot in metaphorically in other contexts, or idiomatically in other contexts,
yes.
right? Yeah.
Generally, what it means is you're not going all in on something. You're not putting all of your risk. You're not risking everything, right? So, for instance, in the current context, there are a lot of countries who don't want to to order only one type of vaccine. They're going to say, okay, we're going to order some vaccine from this company, some vaccine from this company, because if one of them turns out to have problems or not work, we haven't risked everything, right?
Yeah. I want to say it's the opposite of putting all your eggs in one basket.
It is the opposite of putting all your eggs in one basket. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like putting some of your eggs in another basket, basically.
Yeah.
So let's see. What do they mean when they re-engineer the landscape?
So this is actually a combination of two different idioms. So one is we're using re-engineer as a kind of metaphor. Like, to engineer something means to design it, right? So re-engineer means redesign. But this is metaphorical for something you can't actually necessarily change. So re-engineering something can mean, thinking of it in a different way, or coming at it from a different direction, or handling the problem by creative means. So changing the way you view something. And the landscape here is like, a landscape means, like the rolling hills or whatever, but metaphorically it just means the situation, where you find yourself. So you often hear the phrase like, the landscape has changed, meaning, the situation has changed. And you see that with it re-engineer, like we have to, re-engineer out of the situation. So this is just combining these two. Re-engineer the landscape means you have to change the situation creatively.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really interesting, pithy idiom, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a re-engineer the landscape. Yeah. Okay, another one from Susanta. What does a vaccine is piloted mean? I think
so this is actually important. This does not mean directed, or like, it's not at all related to pilot as in, fly a plane. It does not mean directed by. It does not mean that. What it means, a pilot is an example as a noun, can also mean like a trial run, a test. So think of it like a test pilot. So a pilot of something, like a pilot episode of a television show, is like a test, an example of that television show, and they air it. Hope it's popular, and if so, the pilot of something is like a test of it. So a vaccine being piloted means it's like a live test. They're sending it out, they're letting it be used, but it's still a test. It's not the main run yet, right?
Yeah. So it doesn't mean, because in the context of a pilot episode, that's generally like the first episode.
Right.
It doesn't mean coming first, does it? It's strictly the fact that it's like a test.
I mean, the pilot is not ever going to be the first thing, but it's often the first thing that gets out to the public. Like, used to be a beta test was not something that normal people would get, right? Only a small group of professionals usually would get it. And nowadays, betas are often like released for everyone. Open betas. Nowadays, there's even open alphas, right? But the idea of a pilot is it's the first thing that gets put out publicly to test to see if it's good enough, right? It is usually first, so sometimes you'll hear it used to talk about something that's first. But technically, the word for that is flagship. So sometimes people say, this is our pilot program, meaning it's the first and their big initiative, but really that's called a flagship program. But yes, people do sometimes use it to just mean the first big thing. But that's not what it means in context of a vaccine, though. Definitely means it's a test. Yeah. I mean, it's something they know works, but they're testing to see how it's going to be received and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. So another one here from Suzanne. I skipped over this one accidentally. What does the phrasal verb "come in after" mean? So
I'm not sure. In after. I'm not sure this would be a phrasal verb. I'm trying to
No.
think of an example where it would mean something. It literally just means to come
It
into
could
something
mean,
after.
yes. So it could mean in a race,
Mhm.
the one driver came in after the other one,
Mhm.
so it could mean that.
It also, I mean, I guess you will hear this, like someone's pursuing somebody, or even either in a positive way, or the monster came into the forest after them, or like you could say we're gonna go in after somebody to rescue them, right?
Yeah.
But again, I'm not sure if there's a specific like idiomatic phrasal verb meaning here.
Okay. Well, look, Suzanne, if you can come back to us with if that hasn't answered your question, give us more context or an example. That'll be helpful. But here's another one. What is half sister? So this is quite simple.
Right.
So a half, you have two parents, or biologically we have two parents. If you have a half sister, it means you share one of your parents with that person. So maybe you have the same dad, but not the same mom or mother.
Right. And the same for half brother or half sibling.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay. Let's see. It's a repeated question there. Let's see. Yeah, so you don't need to keep repeating questions. We do try to get through them all. If we don't, answer immediately, it's just because we haven't got to you yet. So yeah, don't worry about that. Let's see here. Jack Darby says, "What are the most fundamental words a person must learn to begin learning that language after having learned the alphabets first? I have ambition to learn a few things outside my mother tongue." Okay, so what are the most important words to learn? I think probably the most important is the verb to be, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, actually, it's a really good trick that I learned. Excuse me. Which is to look up a list of irregular verbs in a language and start with those, because the irregular verbs are the ones that are going to be the most common.
Yes.
However, I'm not convinced that this is actually the best way to learn a language, to start by learning the most fundamental words. Other than to be, definitely. This will work well for some people. Other people, it's going to get way too complicated. An example, fundamental words in English would be things like the or and. So articles, conjunctions, prepositions to, for, those are hard. They do not have simple rules, and you would not want to start with those, but they are extremely fundamental. There's this concept that we think fundamental is going to be easy. Fundamentals are not easy. Fundamentals are hard, and they take a lot of practice. So oftentimes
they'll be a lot
learning
easier.
a language,
they'll be a lot easier if you've got a bit more context. If you learn around them a little bit more first. Yeah.
We do an example of this is we start when we're teaching verb tenses. We don't start with the simple tenses because on their own they are not simple in the sense of easy, right? If you learn all the other tenses first and then you go to simple, like, oh, okay, it makes so much sense. It's not that hard. But if you learn the simple tenses first, it makes you're learning a whole set of rules that are going to be completely different on all the other tenses. But there are some tricks. If you're the kind of person who does enjoy learning fundamental words first, look up irregular verbs, the verbs to be and go and have. Virtually every language has something similar to be and go and have that are just incredibly important for not just like speaking, but how the language works. And then pronouns. Learn especially your demonstrative pronouns: this, that, these, those. And they, he, she, it, that kind of stuff, and learn how to ask questions.
Okay. Also from Jack, he says he's just saying just watch a lot of garbage movies on Hollywood or Netflix documentaries. You can learn English. So yeah, I think so. This is a response to a previous question about, I think it was from a bourgeois about finding people to talk to properly. Yeah. So, but it's pointing out that you can learn a lot from watching movies and TV shows and things. Now, those are great ways to help you practice your listening, so your understanding, and as we see every week that Susanza is doing, she's watching things and writing down phrases that she doesn't understand, and then she asks us what they mean. So that's a great way that you can use television and Netflix and things. But it's not going to be so useful for helping with your speaking skills. But yeah, definitely a great tip. So yeah.
Did you get Lolly Lolly's question, or did you answer that one already?
No. Here we are. RP accent and posh accent. What's the difference, please? Well, I don't think that an RP accent is necessarily posh. I think that posh. I think RP is sort of the actual. If you think of the phonetic chart, it's sort of, the correct, using each one of those correctly and in the correct way. But then, so posh then goes beyond that. Posh, like how the Queen speaks, or whoops, yeah, so it goes a little bit beyond that. What do you think, Tony? Is that
so for those of you who don't know what these mean? RP means received pronunciation. It's like the kind of British English that is taught in schools, like the correct pronunciation. And again, every accent is genuine and real, and there are correct pronunciations in that accent. But then usually there's kind of an official version of any accent or any dialect or any language that's taught. So RP is like what's taught in schools, right? And then posh is like, it's not even really an upper class accent, it's an aristocratic accent. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
And so that obviously the reason RP is what's taught is because education started as something for the upper classes and slowly became universal. But they are different things. And I don't think it's necessarily true to say that one came from another. It's like talking about which is correct, American English or British English. They were together and then they separated a few hundred years ago, and they've just, both changed and evolved since. I think the same is true for RP and posh. They have some similarities, but they're two different things. And I kind of agree with what Colin is saying. Posh is more than just having correct pronunciation. There's some other things to that.
But it's like any other accent, or whether it's regional or based on anything else. Like when I lived in London, the idea of regional accents kind of breaks down in London, because you've got lots of different some kind of subcultures living in the same space that will have their own accent and their own dialect in a way. It's not just about a region, and so yeah, you might have posh neighborhoods next to other neighborhoods, and they have different accents. People that live in different accents, they may live only a few hundred meters away from each other, but they're in different kind of social groups, and so there's different cultures overlapping.
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Now on this topic, Jack Darby later asks another question about posh. Why does the Queen speak in that weird manner? I mean, who is she trying to impress? Is Jack Darby's question, not mine. So one thing that's important to understand here is that posh is not a fake accent. It's a real accent, just as real as Northern or Welsh or London or like a Southern accent or a Bostonian accent in the US. People might come up to someone who speaks a Southern accent and be like, why can't you speak correctly? And they might be like, why can't you speak right? Because it's their accent. So no accent is fake. Like, this is a way people speak, right? It's very core to who they are. Not that you can't change it, but it's still very core to who you are. Would you agree with that about the posh accent?
Absolutely. Yeah. So posh people, they're not trying to impress anyone. They're just speaking in the way that's natural to them, because of the culture that they're from.
Yeah. Now the Queen is a bit different, and this is true of any like world leader or just an important person, like for instance, a university professor. Many of you are university students. Do you think that your university professor speaks the way they do in a lecture when they're talking to their grandkids? They have a job and they're doing their job, and part of their job is to present themselves in a certain way. The queen has a job, and part of her job is to present herself in a perfect way, or not a perfect way, a certain way. She's not trying to impress you. She's trying to be the queen, right, and fulfill that role. So that she might talk less formally when she's talking to her family, but you only ever hear her when she's giving a speech, right? Yeah. People don't always talk the same way in a speech as they do when they're just kind of talking to their family.
And the same is true with you and me. I think we when I don't speak, like I was saying earlier, my English changed when I started teaching English. But maybe sometimes when I'm with my old friends or my family, I might go back to it's not going back. I might speak in that different way,
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I definitely when I'm talking to my family, when I talk to my family for a long time, I tend to speak in a slightly different way. When I talk to my wife's family for any length of time, I tend to speak in a slightly different way. But we all talk differently in different contexts, I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay, so Chan Daniel says, how can I train my English for my school exam? I feel that I always make grammar mistakes for a long time. Also, do you think grammar is the foundation of English? So we talked about this earlier, a little briefly. I think no.
So that's for the first question.
I'll answer the second part first, because I think no, grammar is not the foundation of English. If you want to use a building analogy, it's like the scaffolding that you put up around the building, although I prefer to use to say a tree, because it's constantly changing. Like in order to examine it better. It's so the language would exist without people studying the grammar, although the grammar would probably be there.
Well, I think we need to distinguish, right? Yeah. We need to distinguish between the so for
natural
instance,
grammar
there's innate rules that make the world work, right? And they're mathematical rules, but they are not the mathematical rules you learn in school, right? Multiplication and addition and stuff like that. Well, no, the mathematical rules that make the world work are complicated and they're behind the scenes, and like physicists learn how to use them, but you don't have to learn how to use them. So there's like the deep whys, and that's part of what grammar is, and that's one thing that people mean when they say grammar. But if you're talking about the lists of rules that you memorize, no, that is not the foundation. At best, it's like the second or third step, right?
Yeah. And again, those things are a tool for you to use. They're not the goal. Learning them in themselves is not the goal. They're a tool you can use to help understand and express yourself in English.
Yes. So you need to learn enough grammar rules so that you can begin to both express yourself and learn without focusing on the rules. Because once you can do that, you're going to begin picking up the other rules without having to memorize them. And that's the only way you can learn most of the rules. Because for instance, with like prepositions or something like that, there are too many rules and too many exceptions that you could ever memorize. You have to learn it by practicing and by getting used to it and by internalizing it.
Yeah. So what about the first part of the question? How can I train my English for my school exam?
Yeah, so this is tricky specifically to me because exams are not always a good test of how well you speak English. They're a good test of how well you learned exactly what the course was trying to teach you.
Yeah.
And so we can't always help you with that.
And it depends. So you might be having an exam on a very specific subject within English, or it might, if it's sort of one of the Cambridge exams or IELTS, then one of the ways to practice that is, there'll be very particular types of exercise where you have to do. They won't tell you. You won't be able to find out what the questions are in advance or the text that you might need to read, but you will be able to find out what type of exercise they're going to give you. And you may be able to. This is if you're talking about the Cambridge exams or the IELTS and things like that, the well-known exams. You'll be able to know how to do a certain type of exercise. For example, there's different types of reading exercise. Sometimes you'll get the question. Sometimes it makes sense to read the questions first and then know exactly what you're looking for. Sometimes it makes sometimes it makes more sense to quickly read the text first, so you get kind of the gist of it. So yeah, there are different techniques for different types of question, but unless we know the kind of exam you're doing, it's difficult to answer that question. Yeah. Okay, let's see. So Jean-Luc Dofu says, hello, how to think in English every day and no more translating. So we had a question like this earlier on. I think, Tony, it may have been when you left us briefly. Yeah. So translating and thinking in English. Do you have any thoughts on that, Tony?
Yeah. So we actually, I believe, talked about this last week. That definitely this is a thing that happens for some people. Once you've practiced in a language, eventually you begin to create your thoughts in that language and say them directly without having to think it in English first and then speak it, or think it in whatever your language first and then translate it and then speak it into English. This is really hard to do intentionally, I think. And this is the difference between memorizing rules and internalizing a language. When you internalize it, you'll be able to create thoughts in that language without having to start in your own language. However, don't make this the end, your main goal. For some people, this might not ever happen, and it has nothing to do with how skilled you are in that language. It has to do with how your brain works. There's also something about the language that you grew up speaking that is going to be core to literally the shape of your brain, right? And so don't worry about this too much. I think it happens a lot with bilingual people that grow up bilingual. When they learn another language really well, they're able to think in that language just as easily. But then a lot of people who don't grow up that way never achieve it. So don't beat yourself up if you can't do it. But the only way to, I think, get there is by, instead of like focusing on learning a lot of rules, it's just get out there, speak a lot, talk to people, listen to people, and practice.
I remember, like, I'm not brilliant at Spanish, but Spanish is like my second language. I don't speak it very well, and I wouldn't say that I even think in Spanish, but I have thought in Spanish a little bit occasionally. It doesn't just suddenly, it's not like you switch and then suddenly you start thinking in another language.
Right.
But I do kind of remember that when that sort of first happened and first started happening. And it wasn't something that I tried to do. It was just something that happens naturally when you get to a certain level. So you just have to keep getting out there and practicing, basically. Yeah. Okay. HWK says, I can barely read some written sentences, but I don't know how the intonation goes. Is it something that I have to just guess or get from experience? So this is, I guess, is about pronunciation, about how to know if you see a word you've never read before, how do you pronounce? There's no way to know how to pronounce it, as you can tell by how badly I pronounce people's names on this show. So yeah, this is a real challenge, especially, and I think this is especially true in English, because English is not phonetic. Especially all the vowels have lots of different ways that they're pronounced. So yeah, it's something you get from experience. But then this is also where phonetics comes in. This is where the it could be helpful if you learn a new word to look up the phonetic transcription, and because that's a way that you can write a word phonetically, so you can know how it's meant to be said. But mostly it's going to come down to experience and, again, practice, listening to people and practicing.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
I would. You can learn to pronounce a language to intone correctly. Some languages, this is very, very important. And so they have guides. Like when you're learning to speak a language, you have to learn how to intone it. Arabic is a really good example, right? If you're learning Arabic, you can take whole classes on not just the vocabulary and the grammar and the pronunciation, but how to intone sentences, right? English, there's not necessarily super simple rules, other than things like, you raise your voice towards the end of a WH question, things like this. English words tend to be stressed very individually. So there's the cadence is one kind of beat per word, because each word has one individual stress to it. But again, I definitely agree with Colin. Really, it just comes from listening and practicing saying it yourself, because you can have heard 1,000 sentences in English or 1,000,000 sentences in English, but pronunciation is physical. You have to practice those muscles, and you have to practice that in order to actually get it yourself. Like listening to drums does not make you a good drummer.
Yeah. A Bajwa again here, just saying this live chat's very helpful. I'll wait for your next live lesson. So that's really great, and I'm really glad you were able to join us today. So make sure you're subscribed and you click the bell icon. We do try to do this every Tuesday at 2 p.m. UK time. But we may do it at other times. And in January, we are going to be doing a lot more things.
Yes.
So, for subscribers, as well as some things for people who are members, like the Zoom calls that I mentioned earlier. So, yes, do make sure you're subscribed. We've got a lot of interesting content and events happening very, very soon. Let's see. So Raman Kara says, how do I teach grammar better? I'm a 3rd grade ELT student and I have a short amount of experience, but I noticed the weak side of mine. So 3rd grade so that's quite young students, right? What would 3rd grade be?
3rd grade is like 8-year-olds. Right. So I think that this maybe means something different in Turkey. But also you said, how do you teach grammar better, or do you mean that you teach? Are you a 3rd grade ELT teacher?
Yeah, so I think Raman must be a teacher who teaches 3rd grade, but he teaches English as a foreign language to 3rd grade students.
Yes, Raman. Let us know if we're answering your question together. But in terms of how do I teach grammar better, that is a very tricky thing to do, because a lot of textbooks and a lot of instructional material will tell you to teach people to memorize a list of rules. And that can be a very difficult and unhelpful way to teach grammar.
Especially for 8-year-olds.
Well, yeah, definitely. And so again, our focus is you look for the core rules that make everything else make sense. And don't worry so much about all the exceptions and all the little things. So for instance, we get asked a lot to explain prepositions. And we just don't get caught into that, because we could spend so much time explaining any individual preposition and we would never finish it. There would always be more things that we didn't get a chance to talk about. So we really try to focus our time on the things that are going to, like one rule that will help you in as many situations as possible, right? Like for instance, if we were going to talk about prepositions, and then you have to have something after them. You don't do something for on its own. It's for a reason or for a person, right? Those are rules that are going to help you with all prepositions, as opposed to picking one and talking about all the different situations where you would use for, right? Do you agree with that, Colin? I mean, that's kind of our Inside English course that we're going to be launching in January. January is all about, is
Yeah. So
rethinking the way grammar to make it actually make sense.
yeah. Now, but I think this is going to be very different when you're talking about teaching third graders or eight-year-olds.
Mhm.
You work because you wouldn't expect them to even understand the rules, let alone learn by them. So I think the most important thing with third graders is just to make it fun and get them using the English and try to get them to be learning naturally, almost subconsciously, just through practice and rather than trying to actually learn the grammar rules, right?
Well, I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily true, just because, I mean, all the schools I've taught in grade school, they're learning a lot of grammar rules. They're learning, things like really basic things, like what is a noun, right? And what is a verb? And maybe not even as complicated as what is tense, but really, really basic rules. Because that's the way it often works with anything, is when you're first learning something, you don't learn rules, you just learn a little bit here and there. And as you graduate up to kind of middle level, like grade school, then you start learning a few really, really core rules for how to put things together. So I mean, I do agree with, like, you just need to make it fun. You need to keep them engaged, give them a reason to want to learn English. Let them listen to English music or watch English television shows, clips, YouTube videos, to make it so that they want to learn some English.
Yeah. Okay, so A Bourgeois is saying, will you upload this live session? Yeah, all of the live sessions we've ever done are still available to watch. We have had some issues with some of the comments or the live comments disappearing, and that's due. We figured out that that's due to editing the video afterwards. So we're not going to do that from now on because we want the comments to remain visible. So yeah, this one will still be available at the same URL. So if you want to just save that and come back and watch it later, you can. I'd also like to chop it up and put some little individual clips for each question on the Instagram, but haven't got around to doing that just yet. But yeah, everything is all permanent. And I think you were also asking about some clarification about members, about membership. So what I was saying is anyone can be a subscriber. That's free, or as long as if you've got a YouTube account and you're commenting, then you can also subscribe. I'm sure most of you already know that, and that's free. But you can also join the channel. If you look underneath the video next to the subscribe button, there should be a join button. If you click on that, it will tell you a little bit more. And there's several different levels where you get some different benefits. So one of the things you get is you get a sort of badges and emojis that you can use in the live stream. So you see Lolly Lolly as a member. That's why she's got our logo next to her name in the YouTube chat, and Gaspar as well. He's a member. And they also get to use some custom emojis, which I'll post one of them now if I can. Here we go. It's basically my face. Yeah, so you get to use some of those. That's at all levels. And then there's some other things that we've added at the different levels. But the Zoom live calls, we haven't started doing those yet because we don't have a huge number of members, only about 10 or so. We've just got a new member.
Daniel Gordiev. Welcome.
Is that how you pronounce that?
I mean, I'm not getting it exactly right, but Daniel Gordiev, yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. Yes. So thank you very much for joining, especially as that's exactly what we were talking about at the time. Yeah. So Daniel, you will be able to join us when we start doing our Zoom calls in January. Yeah. Now, some people, I noticed Karan and somebody else was saying that they can't see the join button. So it is possible that it's not visible in certain countries if Google doesn't allow payments for certain countries. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's possible. Usually it's right next to the subscribe button, right?
Yeah. It should be a gray button right next to the subscribe button. So yeah, that would be a shame if it's not visible to everyone. But yeah, I mean, I think it should be visible to most people. But yeah, that's the way to join us when we do when we start doing our Zoom calls in January. And like I said, technically that's going to be for the higher level of membership, but in January we're going to open it up to all levels because we've only got 15 or so members. Yeah, so, and I don't think everyone will join us every time, so should be plenty of room for everyone. So I've lost where we got to in the question.
Can we go ahead and back up and answer Daniel's question? So you just a second. Sorry. Yeah, it's up there. Here, I'll go ahead. So
yeah, you go ahead, and I'll find.
Hello from Russia. I have to learn a tongue twister by heart, and you say, I'll say it in a second. But I do not know how to pronounce it in the correct way. I do not see the differences. Can you help me, please?
Okay.
So this is an interesting tongue twister here. I'm going to say it. I'll try to say it very slowly. Although this is not the way I know this tongue twister. So I'll tell you both. So I'll read it out first the way you wrote it. So which, wish, wicked, wish. And it's a question, so you would write like which, wicked, wish. Now I learned this with the first wish, the one in the middle, as wished, like the past tense, like wished. So which, wished, wicked, witch. I can't even say it. So and which and which, like either with the WH or just WITCH. Some people will pronounce those words exactly the same. When I say them, I'm pretty sure it's exactly the same. Which. Other people, depending on the accent, it will be very slightly different, but I say it pretty much exactly the same. Wished is also very, very, very close because when you say wished, you almost pronounce the D like a T, the ED. You don't pronounce it ed. It's not wish ed. It's wished. It's like almost like a T, wished. And that's why it fits with which, wished. They're all very, very similar. So which, wished, which, wicked, wish.
Yeah.
Hope that helps you. Let us know real quickly if you have any other.
So the first two are homophones, right? Did you say this already? I was a bit.
Yes, like I mean, some people will pronounce them differently depending on the accent, but I would pronounce them the same. Which.
Yeah, so would I. They're exactly the same pronunciation.
Which. Mm-hmm. Which. Wished. Again, with almost like a T sound at the end. Which, wicked, and that's the only one that's different, right? It's very different. Wicked doesn't sound like wished.
So Daniel, what I would do is I would look up the phonetic transcription of these words, and then you'll see that they're very similar, but there'll be one letter or one symbol that is different, and then you can focus in on what is the difference between each of the two words because they're very, very similar apart from one thing. So if you focus in on that one thing, you'll be able to figure it out. And again, remember, pronunciation is physical. Mm-hmm. So what's the physical difference is what you need to think about.
So Daniel's saying that their teacher demands the differences between which and which. So which
demands differences between which and which. Well, you need to show them this podcast, and you can show them this episode and say, look, I'm a British native speaker, and we've got someone from America as well, and we both pronounce which and which exactly the same. They are homophones, which means they're pronounced in exactly the same way.
Yeah. You can also look these up, like look them up in a list of homophones online. and you'll find them. They'll be on any
Definitely.
list of homophones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I can't think of any off the top of my head, any particular accent where you would say these differently.
No.
They're just definitely homophones. They sound,
Yeah,
if not
but there
exactly
is
very similar.
definitely a difference between which and wish.
Yes.
So which and wish.
Mhm.
So you got sh and ch and sh. That's the difference between which and wish. So, but there is no difference between those two words. They're both pronounced which.
Yes. And so this is a good example of, okay, so some people will look and they'll say, oh, this is pronounced with a CH. This is spelled with a TCH. I'm going to go and look up TCH. And how is TCH pronounced? And you'll get examples like switch and lots of different ones. And it might be a specific symbol that might not be the same as what CH is pronounced. But you can't always go by that in English. You have to look at the word. Fortunately, you can always find the transcription of a word. Most dictionaries will even have like a little play button so you can hear it. But if you look at transcriptions and you say, okay, these two transcriptions are the same in IPA, then you know that they really are pronounced the same way, right? Actually, so that might be the best thing to do, is to look up like you said, look up the IPA transcriptions of both of these words and show your teacher they're pronounced the same.
Yeah. Okay. So somebody was asking about Instagram, saying don't go without telling us your Instagram account. So it is ENG Language Club. So Ing Language Club. There should be a link in the description. There should be a list of links. One of those should be the Instagram. I don't know if you can confirm that for me, Tony. So I don't actually have.
Yep, yeah, Instagram. Ing language. It doesn't show the whole link, but it's
so
there.
yeah.
Like
if you want to find the Instagram, click on the link in the description. Yeah. So it's gone to 1:15. Now, are there any good questions we missed?
Alejandra Serra asked, what do you have any advanced tutoring for advanced learners?
Well, you know what? I think our course, Inside English, which is going to be coming out on the 1st of January, is kind of useful for all levels. I think even a lot of native speakers would be enlightened by a lot of what we talk about. Because that's certainly not aimed at beginners. That course, it's kind of assuming that people will have already gone through the kind of syllabus the way that English is normally taught, and then we're going back and looking at those basics of how tense is formed, and therefore how English is structured. But we're looking at it from a slightly different angle, in a way to make it make more sense and be more help people to have it to be able to use it more naturally. So in a way, that's Inside English, which will be coming out soon, and a lot of the videos that we're going to be making soon will tie in with that. But yeah, we don't actually do any kind of tutoring other than these live streams. But like I said, in January we will start doing Zoom calls, but what level that is, it depends on who joins us. So great.
There's also a question from Annabella that we can answer pretty quickly, I think. It's quite a ways up there. She said, I'm a little bit confused about ready to or ready for. Can you tell me the difference? And so there's a little bit more to this that you could look into, but the basic difference is that ready to is something you are going to do. Ready for is something that's going to happen to you, right? So I'm ready to run, or I'm ready to eat. Or you might ask someone, are you ready to eat? Are you ready to do your test? It's something they are going to do, or if you're saying it, you are going to do. Ready for is something that's happening to you. So someone might say, are you ready for your test? Because they didn't say, are you ready to do your test? because that would be ready two.
Already,
But ready for means it's going to happen to you. You're going to have to go into your test, right? Or are you ready for the storm, right? The storm is coming in, right? Are you ready for Christmas? Like Christmas is coming. You're not. Yeah. Whereas, are you ready to celebrate Christmas?
So right? just remember, you are ready to do something. You're ready for something to happen to you.
Exactly. So very, very simple. It's a great question. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, I think we may have missed a few questions at the end there. I think that's just we're getting to the stage now where we're not able to answer all questions because we're growing, which is great. But we are going to try to look up those questions that we've missed and maybe start with them next week. And by all means, go on.
One great idea is if you were listening or you're watching the live stream later, if you have a question, either because you didn't get your question answered or maybe we talked.
Oh, I think we're losing Tony there. Yeah, Tony, you're breaking up again. I'm gonna.
How about now? Is this better?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
Well, I'll just cut short. Like, put it in the comments.
Yeah.
Put your question in the comments if you didn't get it answered, or if or give us some examples. Yeah, that's always great.
Yeah, and also I normally set up the this live stream in advance. So and then what I do is I put it if you go to the website and you go to englishlanguageclub.co.uk/live, you'll see when our next live stream is going to be. So then you can go to YouTube and you can put your comment. You can start chatting as soon as I've created the stream. So
you can give us 20 questions to start with.
So it could be that next Tuesday we start and there's already 10 questions from you, and that would be great, because I'm always a little bit scared that we're not going to have any questions and not have anything to talk about for the first few minutes. It's never happened, but it always worries me slightly. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.